This is a viewer-requested prop. Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name's Ryan, or RJR Productions, and today I'm going to be making another requested prop. It is the Mandalorian helmet from the newly released Disney Plus TV show, The Mandalorian.
Right now I have the base of the dome completed. This is just a 28-inch circle because this Mandalorian helmet is a little bit bigger than my other helmets. Then it just has the two support cross beams. So now I'm going to take this piece and glue it along the top.
The dome technique on this helmet is the exact same as my last video. And if you haven't caught that video, it's almost exactly the same as my past 8 or so helmets. It's just the difference is on the panels that go horizontally across it. Instead of them being just flat pieces of cardboard, I cut little divots into them, and that just gives the helmet a little bit more curve, and it makes it a lot more round and concave. So now I am working on the straps that go across the top of the helmet, and you might be wondering, well, why is there those crossing bars of cardboard underneath the dome? And that is for giving the dome a little bit of shape, so when you're building it, it doesn't become out of place and out of proportion of the oval shape that we're trying to go for. So once I had those two parts done, I took my visor template that I made and I glued that onto the helmet. I ended up making it a little bit closer to the visor later on just because I didn't like how low it was on the helmet. It looked a little awkward. But then once I was happy with that, I glued on a support piece in the middle just to keep it held in place. And that is so while I'm spackling and stuff, the spackle doesn't dry in a position that I don't want it to. It'll dry in a position to where it'll be able to be removed later on, and then I can put the visor in eventually. Once I was happy with that, I had it all glued on, and then I started working on the side pieces. So the side pieces for the cheeks are just a piece of cardboard that's curved to fit the inner dimension of that cheek panel, and I just cut that out and glued it on for both sides. And then there's a panel of cardboard next to that angles outwards towards the outside of the helmet. And once I had those pieces on, all I did was lengthen it a little bit just because the helmet was looking a little short, and then I just added those filler pieces that go behind it. So that was just a piece of cardboard that I held up in position, bent it a little bit, and then traced out the shape, cut it out, and glued it on. And I ended up shortening this and then heightening it again just because I thought it looked a little weird, and once I thought it was tall, then I adjusted it, and then to me it looked short, so I eventually just went back. But then once I was gluing in those two side pieces, the front of the helmet was coming together pretty nicely. These pieces on the inside, I took my X-Acto knife and I shaved it down a little bit just to get a nice shape, and your head would slide into this easier. Since this is going to be a bigger helmet, I'm actually going to do something new on this helmet, and I'm going to put some padding on the inside. Now the padding is just some upholstery foam, but I figured I could do it since this helmet is a little bit big. And I ended up doing that a lot later on, but it's very nice and I highly recommend that you would do that too. I just trimmed these edges a little bit at the very bottom just to make it a little bit of a slope going towards the back, because if you look at it from a side profile, the front of the helmet is supposed to be lower down than the back. And then I just took a big piece of cardboard and I glued it on, making sure it was level with that last back strap. And this was very simple. It was just a big piece of cardboard that I cut score lines in with my X-Acto knife, and that made it very easy to bend and glue in place eventually. And then once I was happy with the placement of that, I had it glued in, and then I traced out the shape that I wanted to cut it in, and then I just cut it out the back. Now this helmet is really coming together, and all I needed to do is work on the sides. So I just took pieces of cardboard and mapped out where those side ear pieces would go.
Now I have the base of the helmet done, all the way around to the back. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on those details that go on the sides. And for that, I'll do the detail that goes on the back. And then finally, the last step will be to fill in the dome.
Now, the side details on this helmet are very particular, and they're very precise and complex. So, I took pieces of thin cardboard, this is some cereal box cardboard, and they're maybe 3/4 of an inch long and 2 inches high, and I glued those on at a little bit of an angle with a little bit of a gap, less than 1/4 inch in the middle, and then I could glue on a small support piece in the middle of that. And then on top of that, I added another strip that was maybe in between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch wide on top of that, and then I just mapped out this weird shape. It's basically flat on the bottom, then it goes up about 1/2 inch, and then it's rounded off at the top, goes back down until it's about 1/4 inch away from that bottom strip. That continues all the way along, and then the same thing is on the other side. So, once I had that piece all done, I started mapping out the detail that goes above it. So it's basically just an oval with squared off bottom, and I just cut that out and glued it on, and I made sure to give it a wall. And then on top of that piece, there is a little detail that's basically a rectangle with the top of it rounded off. Once I was happy with that one side, I made the few adjustments that need to happen, like putting a plate on the very bottom, and then I went ahead and did the same thing on the other side. So the other side is exactly the same. The two side details are the same. I know that on my Boba Fett helmet, the sides are different. One of them is a lot smaller than the other one, but this one's different. This one has two exactly symmetrical sides, so I didn't need to worry about anything complex. I took another one of those oval pieces, and I cut it out and glued it onto that other remaining side, and also one of those C bracket pieces. I guess that's what I'm gonna call it now. So I took one of those C bracket pieces and I glued it on to that side after I had the sidewall of the oval done. And this was basically just troubleshooting. I took a piece of cardboard, I wedged it in the gap, and then I drew out the same shape that was on the other side. Then I added a border wall to that was about in between 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch thick, and then I just glued that onto the side. And then once I was happy with that, I was going to fill in the dome. Real quick, if you don't have any cereal box cardboard, what you can do is just peel off the top layer of a regular piece of cardboard, and that can simulate the same effect. I used that in a couple places where the cereal box cardboard couldn't bend as nicely. So just keep that in mind if you're going to make this helmet.
Now that I have both of the side details all done on this helmet, I'm going to do that one back detail on the very back, and then I'll fill in the dome once I'm done with that.
I found a nice reference image that showed me what the back paneling looks like. So it's basically just a rectangle with a hole cut out of the middle of it, and then inside of that hole there's a bunch of details. So this rectangle piece is about 2 inches wide and 3.5 inches tall, and it just has that middle part cut out of it. Then once I had that detail done, I moved on to the dome. So I took pieces of cardboard, as I said, the same as my last helmet, and I just cut out little wedges about 1/2 inch in on either side of it. And then once I was happy with that, I glued on the bottom, folded it over, angled off the top, and then I cut that off where I had marked. And then I just filled in the two remaining sides, so I just held up a piece of cardboard, and then from the inside I traced out that shape, cut it out a little bit towards the outside of the line, and then once I had that done, I just glued the piece on, as you can see here. And I just simulated this for all 4 corners of the piece, and it didn't take me too long. So this is the 4th dome variant I have done on this channel. The first one was for my Phase 2 Clone Trooper helmet, which was a pattern I pulled from a bike helmet. And then I had the craft foam one for the Black Panther helmet, and that one was also pulled from a bike helmet. It just looked a little bit different. And then the last one is what I used for my past 6 helmets up until my most last clone pilot one, and that's basically just a strip going down the middle, and then a piece on the other side, and then pieces filling in that 3 per sector. And the difference between my last 2 and the rest is the dome has a little bit of wedges cut out of those corner pieces, and that basically allows it to conform to the shape of the dome a lot nicer, and it gives it a lot more curve, and I don't need to do as much cleanup work on the spackling and sanding stage. And also, it honestly just looks a lot better than the other ones. You can't see the dome details as much in the finished product, which is what I'm really happy about, and it's making me happy that I'm getting some progress done on developing my different stages and strategies of making these pieces. The time difference of making these various types of domes with the first simplest cardboard variant, that only took me about 30 minutes to do, and then the slightly more complex cardboard one took me about an hour to do, and this one only takes me maybe an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes, so I highly recommend the third option if you have a little bit of skill with cardboard.
Now that I am done constructing this helmet, it is time to go outside and spackle over all the seams. So basically I'm going to do everything on the dome, and then these seams on these little cheek panels, and then this one seam at the back. And then once I have that done, I can sand it down and then prime it.
The spackling stage, once again, is the exact same as my past 9 helmets, and the Mark 85 was the first of those 9, so basically I just experimented in that one. I actually used a putty knife in that one, which I found was actually not necessary. I can just use my finger, and then I smooth it out with a little bit of water. It doesn't matter if it's warm or cold, it just basically dilutes the spackle enough to where it can get in the cracks and become a lot more smooth. So I just put that over all of the various seams across the helmet, and then once I was happy with the coverage, I went over and sanded it with a makeshift sanding block. Now, a sanding block is basically like almost a dish sponge, but with sandpaper on it. So basically what I did is I took pieces of craft foam, the same that I used in my Black Panther helmet, and I just glued a piece of sandpaper over the top of it, so it was a little bit squishy, so I could get it in some of those smaller gaps, but it was also easy on sanding the high spots down, and keeping the low spots from not sanding away. Then once I was happy with the sanding job, I primed it, and then I sanded that prime job just a little bit, just to prep it for the black paint that I would put on top of this. And the reason why I'm spraying it black is because black paint is very good for making a base layer for a chrome. For example, if you just used regular spray paint primer color and then you put a chrome or metallic color on top of that, the metallic color wouldn't be as prominent. But if you used a black layer, then the metallic color would pop a little bit more, and it just looks overall a lot nicer. And I highly recommend that you do this, not just in this project, but in any other project that is painted metallically. And then I looked at some reference images just to find a good color to use for the chrome color. It's kind of like a darker silver. So I went to my local hardware store and I just looked around and ended up finding a color that was pretty perfect. It's Rust-Oleum and it is called Dark Steel, if you want to use that. I just picked it out and I think it looked great. It was from one of the more expensive spray paint cans.
So now I'm back inside from painting the helmet and all of the details. So the next step I'm going to do is glue on all of these detail pieces, going down the spine and then on the back of the helmet, down the center. And then after I'm done with that, I'm going to take some of this upholstery foam I have, and I'm going to wrap it in a little bit of black fabric and then glue it to the various places on the inside of the helmet that are a little loose on my head. And then, after I have that done, I can put a little bit of rust detailing on the helmet.
Gluing on the detail pieces was pretty straightforward. I just took my hot glue gun and I glued on that one thicker piece down the middle, and then on top of that one, I glued on the thinner one in the middle, and then at the back, I glued on that detail piece. And the floral foam that I used, or the upholstery foam, I just cut out a piece and then I cut out all of the high spots, so it would be about ½ inch thick, and then I rounded off all of the edges and conformed it to the spots. So basically in my helmet I have 2 rectangles at the back, and then towards the front I have 2 quarter circle pieces filling in on those cheek patterns. So what I did is, once I had the edges of that piece rounded off, I took some of that t-shirt fabric, some of an old t-shirt, and I just cut out a square and then I glued it to the upholstery foam, and that made it really nice, and it made it super comfortable to wear the helmet. So I might be wearing this to a future con if I feel like it. It's a pretty cool helmet and I'm really happy that I made it.
So now I'm done with the padding on the inside of the helmet. You can see that I just took some of that foam, wrapped it in the t-shirt, and then glued it onto the inside of the helmet. And it fits my head a lot better. It's a lot more snug. So now I need to do the rust detailing and then put in the visor. Right now I have the visor in on this helmet, and I think it looks pretty good. So that was just a big piece of plastic, kind of like this, but a lot bigger. And I just took a Sharpie and I colored it black on the inside. Then I just glued it in and made sure that it covers most of the edges and that there's no gaps right here. And you can see that the visor goes all the way through there. So now that I have that done, the next step is to weather it, and this helmet doesn't have much black wash. I'm actually not going to do a black wash on this helmet, but it does have a little bit of rust, especially right here behind these ear detailing and continuing along up here. So I have a little bit of paint for that. I'm going to use a mix of this. This is burnt sienna, and I'm just going to put it on, and then I'm also going to do some copper paint, and I'm just going to mix the two together and then just put it along that edge. Now that I have the rust detailing running up here, around the sides, and at the back of the ear, there really isn't much else to do. There actually is nothing else to do because there's no other weathering other than the rust. So that's it. That's how I made my Mandalorian helmet from the Disney Plus TV show, The Mandalorian. So now, I'll cut to the outro.
This project was really fun to make, and I highly recommend that you make it too. If you have any suggestions on what I should make next, please leave them in the comments down below. This has been RJR Productions, signing off, till next time.